Hey guys, tonight we drift softly into the quiet world of ancient Chinese silk weaving, where the evening wraps the bustling streets of Hangzhou in a gentle, cooling hush. Imagine yourself stepping down a narrow lantern-lit alley, the clatter of the day's commerce fading behind you, replaced by the faint rustle of silk threads and the rhythmic click of wooden looms. The air is thick with the faint scent of tea and a whisper of incense, a subtle promise of calm that seems to soften even the hardest edges of the day. You probably won't survive a day in this delicate world. Those silk threads demand patience and nimble fingers sharper than your morning coffee craving. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see who's winding down with me from halfway across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Evening settles slowly over Hangzhou, the city's heart beating quieter now, but not still. It's the season when twilight blends seamlessly into the lantern-lit night and the silk workshops begin their delicate rituals. You trudge along the worn cobblestones past wooden carts stacked with freshly harvested mulberry leaves, silkworm's favorite meal, and the very beginning of this whole silky story. The workshops themselves are tucked behind faded paper screens, modest but alive with gentle motion. Here, silk weaving isn't just a job. It's a craft passed down through generations, a sacred thread connecting the past with the present. The air hums with quiet energy, neither frantic nor dull, but something in between, like the soft breath before sleep. Inside, the workers settle in for the evening's labor. Unlike the noisy, crowded streets, this place favors stillness and focus. Looms stand like patient sentinels ready to be brought to life by the touch of skilled hands. The weavers don't rush, their motions are deliberate, almost hypnotic, as if weaving calm itself into the fabric. Outside, the river's slow murmur adds to the night's gentle soundtrack, the occasional distant bark of a dog reminding you that this serene world is still very much alive. This quiet time is when the magic happens. You might expect silk weaving to be a solitary mechanical task, but it's anything but. The soft clicking of the shuttle back and forth, the careful threading of the warp and the weaving of patterns are all part of an almost meditative dance. Even now, historians still argue whether the rhythm of this work was more about productivity or if it was embraced as a calming ritual to ease the mind after a long day. Either way, you can feel that intention as you watch the threads slowly come together, shimmering under the fading light. You might wonder how anyone could find peace in such detail-oriented labor, but that's the secret. The work demands your full attention and rewards patience with beauty. The silken threads catch the last rays of daylight, glowing softly as the weavers settle into their evening, their fingers moving with a steady confidence that only comes from years of practice. It's tempting to think the weavers spend these hours alone, but the workshop is a quiet community. There's companionship in shared work, an unspoken bond in the rhythm and the silence. You can almost hear their gentle breaths syncing with the loom's cadence, a shared lullaby sung in clicks and threads. So, as you get comfortable, maybe pull your blanket a little tighter or adjust your pillow. Just so imagine yourself here among the low lantern light. The scent of tea drifting in from a corner, the soft whispers of silk weaving its own kind of lullaby. This is no ordinary history lesson. It's a gentle invitation to step into a slower, quieter world. As the lanterns glow softly, you step closer to the looms that dominate the silk workshops, those ancient wooden frames that seem simple but are actually marvels of precision engineering. Each loom stands ready, its warp threads stretched tight like a spider's web, waiting for the first touch of the shuttle. The threads themselves are so fine, almost whisper thin, spun from silk harvested earlier in the day. You run your fingers over the soft bundles, marveling at how a single cocoon can unravel into a thread hundreds of meters long. The tools of the trade here are both humble and exquisite. There are spindles for twisting the silk, small knives for cutting stray threads, and weights carved from smooth stones that keep everything taut. The shuttle, often a slender piece of bamboo carved and polished by hand, is the weaver's wand flying back and forth with a gentle whoosh that becomes the heartbeat of the workshop. You probably wouldn't guess, but the looms can be incredibly complex. Some are horizontal, others vertical, and each design shapes the fabric differently. Historians still argue whether the horizontal or vertical loom was the original innovation in ancient China, but both have their charms. The vertical loom, for example, allows gravity to help keep the threads straight, while the horizontal version is praised for its portability. You notice the fine silk threads in a dazzling range of colors, soft creams, dusty pinks, deep blues, and you learn that the threads come in different grades. Some are from the first, most delicate unwindings of the cocoon, while others are thicker and less lustrous. The best quality silk is so light it almost floats between your fingers, yet strong enough to outlast many other fabrics. A bit like the perfect bedtime story, soft, but with lasting substance. It's not just the materials that impress you, but the almost meditative quality of the work. The weavers lean in close eyes, half-lidded fingers, nimble and sure. You can almost imagine how the repetitive motions calm their minds, turning weaving into a kind of moving meditation. Some scholars even suggest that the rhythmic sound of the shuttle back and forth helped ancient weavers enter a trance-like state, although of course they might also just have been trying not to think about how much silk they had left to finish by dawn. You glance around and spot a curious little tool that looks like a tiny comb with teeth set closely together. This is the reed which helps keep the threads evenly spaced and packed tightly as the fabric grows. It's a simple invention, but essential. Without it, the whole fabric would fall apart in a loose mess. It's one of those small, overlooked details that remind you how much care and thought go into something that might seem effortless at first glance. Then there are the weights, small clay or stone pieces tied to the warp threads. They pull the threads downward to keep tension steady, counteracting any slack as the weaving progresses. It's a clever solution to a tricky problem, and you can almost hear the faint clink of these weights gently swinging in time with the shuttle. The more you watch, the more you realize that every tool and material is part of a delicate balance. The silk threads are fragile but resilient. The loom is sturdy but precise. It's like a perfectly choreographed dance where even the slightest misstep could unravel the whole performance. And yet somehow this quiet evening ritual manages to be both demanding and soothing. There's a quirky bit of lore you overhear whispered among the weavers about a silk spider that supposedly protects the threads from tangling, spinning invisible webs over the workstations at night. While historians doubt the existence of such magical guardians, the story reveals how deeply the weavers felt connected to their craft, so much so that they imagined invisible helpers in the shadows. As you let your eyes drift over the looms and threads, you begin to appreciate not just the craft, but the calm dedication woven into every inch of silk. It's a reminder that even the most delicate work can carry weight of history, culture, and the human touch. In this quiet evening light, those threads become more than fabric. They become stories you can almost feel with your fingertips. As you settle deeper into the quiet warmth of the workshop, your attention shifts to the women behind the looms. mostly women whose skilled hands and steady patience bring the silk to life. These aren't just workers, they are artisans, guardians of a tradition that stretches back thousands of years. You watch their fingers glide effortlessly across the threads, nimble and precise, as if their hands remember every pattern ever woven before them. The social fabric around these women is as intricate as the silk itself. Many of them are daughters, wives, and mothers balancing the demands of home with the quiet intensity of their evening craft. You might imagine them as distant figures tucked away in shadowy workshops, but in reality they often work together in communal spaces where gentle laughter and whispered stories filled the air like a soft breeze. It's a scene both serene and alive, a delicate balance between work and companionship. The weavers' clothes are simple, comfortable, and practical, often made from coarser fabric to protect their fine silk threads from stray snags. You notice the faint scent of jasmine and sandalwood clinging to their hair and skin, subtle reminders of the incense burning nearby. It's a sensory detail that wraps the whole evening in a cozy cloak of calm. You overhear snippets of conversation, mostly muted to keep focus on the work, but enough to sense the quiet camaraderie. They share news from the village, discuss the quality of the day's silk, or debate which patterns might please the wealthiest customers. Occasionally, a soft giggle breaks the stillness, a reminder that even in the quietest places, life insists on a little fun. There's a fascinating contrast here. While the work requires utmost concentration, the weavers also rely on each other to maintain morale. Apprentices learn by watching and by listening, not just to instructions but to the rhythms of the room. Senior weavers often guide their younger colleagues with gentle nudges or subtle gestures, a language without words, but full of meaning. Historians still argue whether this silent mentorship was a practical necessity or part of a deeper cultural respect for patience and humility. One particularly endearing custom you notice is how the weavers occasionally pause to stretch their fingers or roll their shoulders, a slow, deliberate ritual that seems to honor their bodies as much as their craft. Some say this was an early form of self-care centuries before the idea became a trendy hashtag. A quirky little detail you catch is a small cat curled up near one of the older women. The feline looks far too comfortable amid the fine silk, and the weavers jokingly call it their silk inspector. Apparently, these cats were prized companions in workshops believed to keep the area free of mice, and sometimes thought to bring good luck to the fabric. You begin to realize that these women's quiet evenings were never just about making cloth. They were about weaving a community, a shared space, where stories, skills, and hopes were passed quietly from hand to hand. It's a world where the line between work and life blurs softly, like the threads of silk slowly coming together to form something beautiful. The idea that this work was exclusively women's domain is also under some debate. While women were the primary weavers, historians still argue whether men occasionally took part in the more physically demanding tasks of silk production or dye preparation. Either way, the evening workshops were definitely the women's stage, their fingers telling stories as much as the patterns on the silk. So as you listen to the almost imperceptible clicks and rustles, imagine these artisans not as distant figures frozen in time, but as real people, whose evenings held all the quiet complexity of any life work, friendship, care, and a little laughter hidden beneath the soft glow of lantern light. The weaving rhythm settles deep into your bones as you watch the shuttle glide back and forth across the loom with a soft, hypnotic cadence. It's a sound that seems to pulse in time with your own breathing, steady and soothing. The weavers move with a practiced grace, their motions repetitive, yet full of subtle variation, like a slow, calming heartbeat that invites your mind to drift gently away. You can almost feel the comforting predictability of the rhythm seeping into your consciousness, turning the workshop into a sanctuary of sound. The shuttle's steady click, click, click forms a gentle soundtrack for the evening, each pass weaving not just silk, but an atmosphere thick with calm. You find yourself leaning into this quiet pattern, your eyelids growing heavy with each soothing swoosh. The repetitive nature of weaving here is more than just practical, it's almost ritualistic. The motions engage both body and mind, offering a kind of low-key meditation that helps the weavers focus and forget the outside world for a while. Historians still argue whether this rhythmic work was originally intended as a form of stress relief or simply evolved as a natural consequence of the weaving process. Either way, there's no denying the power of repetition to lull both worker and observer alike into a peaceful state. The shuttle's soft swish reminds you of gentle waves lapping a quiet shore, a perfect sound to drift off to. The movement is smooth and fluid, punctuated by the occasional sharp tap as the weaver presses the weft threads into place with the beater. It's a dance of hand and tool, of muscle memory and patient attention. You notice that the workshop hum isn't just the shuttle, it's also the creak of wooden frames, the soft rustling of silk threads sliding over each other, and the faint whisper of breath. These layered sounds create a soundscape that's both alive and calming, like nature's own white noise. There's a quirky detail about this rhythm that you wouldn't guess from the quiet atmosphere. Some weavers believe that the shuttle's motion can carry their thoughts or prayers into the fabric itself, embedding hopes and dreams into the silk patterns. While this sounds like poetic folklore, it reveals how intimately connected they were to their work. Silk was never just cloth, it was a living story. You might imagine that working in such a quiet environment could be lonely, but the weaving rhythm itself creates a shared experience, a communal pulse that ties everyone together. The weaver's hands keep time with one another, weaving a silent conversation in thread and sound. At moments, a weaver's fingers falter, a thread slips, or the shuttle hesitates, and you can see the subtle shift in concentration as she corrects the motion without breaking the flow. These tiny interruptions only serve to remind you how much skill this work demands and how finely tuned their senses are to the loom's language. Sometimes the workshop becomes so quiet that you can hear the soft tapping of a distant footstep or the rustle of paper lanterns swaying in a gentle breeze outside. These sounds mix with the shuttle's song to create a perfect lullaby for anyone ready to relax. You think about how modern science confirms what the weavers may have intuitively known. Repetitive rhythmic motions can calm the nervous system and slow the heart rate. It's no wonder that watching silk weaving or trying it yourself can feel so deeply soothing. So as you close your eyes for a moment, imagine the shuttle slipping back and forth, the soft tension of threads and the hands that guide them with gentle care. The quiet rhythm wraps around you like a soft silk scarf, warm and comforting, pulling you closer to a restful sleep. The flickering lantern light casts long, dancing shadows across the workshop walls as the evening deepens and you find yourself drawn to the delicate art of pattern weaving. Unlike plain silk fabric, these intricate patterns aren't just decoration. They are stories, symbols, and sometimes secret messages woven right into the threads. The ancient weavers here practiced a craft that was part artistry, part coded language, a visual poem captured in silk. Patterns varied widely from simple geometric shapes to elaborate motifs inspired by nature's swirling clouds, graceful cranes, or the delicate petals of a lotus flower. Each design carried meaning, often reflecting hopes for good fortune, longevity, or protection. Some patterns were specific to certain families or regions, like a quiet signature woven into the cloth itself. You imagine that wearing a patterned silk robe was like carrying a tiny piece of home history or even personal identity wrapped around your shoulders. What's fascinating is how the weavers used different techniques to create these patterns. Sometimes they manipulated the weaving process itself, alternating thread colors and weaving methods. Other times they added embroidery or painted the finished fabric. Historians still argue whether the earliest patterned silks were purely decorative or had a spiritual or social function tied to rituals and status. One quirky detail you might not expect is that some of these ancient patterns were inspired by insects. Yes, you heard that right, insects. The way a butterfly's wings shimmer or the spiral of a snail's shell found their way into the designs. You could say that nature was the original graphic designer for these silk masterpieces. The weavers weren't just mimicking the world around them. They were celebrating it, capturing tiny wonders in their threads. You watch the weaver's fingers pause, occasionally counting threads and double-checking alignment as they create these patterns. It's a slow, patient process. One misstep and the whole design could unravel or lose its symmetry. You can almost see the weaver's quiet pride in these moments, as if each pattern is a little victory over complexity. The dyeing of the silk threads before weaving also plays a crucial role. Traditional dyes were made from plants, minerals, and sometimes insects, producing a palette of rich, muted colors. The colors weren't just chosen for beauty, but often for their symbolic meanings. Red, for example, was lucky and festive, while blue could represent immortality or the vastness of the sky. Imagine the scent of natural dyes mingling with the warm earthiness of the workshop, a subtle reminder that every color and pattern here comes from a deep connection to the land and its resources. The dyes themselves required skill to prepare, and even a slight change in temperature or ingredient could alter the final shade, a delicate balance that the dyers and weavers respected deeply. In the quiet of the evening, surrounded by lantern light and the gentle rhythm of the loom, these patterns come alive. They aren't just decoration, they are a language, a tradition and a legacy woven into every piece of silk. You might not see it, but if you listen closely, you can almost hear the whispered stories in every thread. So, as you relax further, imagine wrapping yourself in a silk fabric alive with these ancient symbols, feeling the soft textures and the subtle stories beneath your fingertips. It's a soothing thought, one that lulls you gently toward the kind of sleep where dreams might carry you through these delicate patterns themselves. The evening air cools gently, carrying the faint scent of mulberry leaves, the essential food for silkworms, and you find yourself drifting toward the other side of the silk-making world, the sericulture that feeds this whole process. It's easy to forget that before the weaving and the dyeing, there's the humble, slow work of growing silk itself. This quiet, almost magical process begins with the tiny, pale eggs of the silkworm, and it's a cycle that connects the natural world to human craft in a beautifully delicate chain. Silkworms, despite their name, are not worms at all, but the larvae of moths, fussy eaters really, who dine exclusively on fresh mulberry leaves. You imagine them inching along the branches, quietly munching away under the dappled sunlight. Their entire existence is devoted to growing big enough to spin that signature cocoon, the silky, glistening home that will eventually become the threads on the loom. The sericulture farms, often family-run and passed down through generations, are as much about patience as anything else. It takes about 6 weeks for the eggs to hatch and the larvae to grow, feeding constantly and molting their skins as they get bigger. Watching silkworms at this stage is almost hypnotic rows of tiny, squirming creatures that seem too fragile to produce something so strong and lustrous. You learn that the rearing process requires careful attention, temperature, humidity, and the freshness of the mulberry leaves all need to be just right. Too much heat or cold and the silkworms falter. Historians still argue whether sericulture was initially discovered by accident or intentionally cultivated after observing silkworm behavior, but what's certain is that this practice became a cornerstone of ancient Chinese life. One quirky little fact that might make you smile: in some parts of ancient China, silkworms were treated almost like pets. Farmers would sing to them or tell stories while tending to their mulberry groves, believing this gentle attention helped produce better silk. You might chuckle imagining a tiny silkworm concert complete with lullabies and tea breaks. When the silkworms finally reach the cocoon stage, they begin to spin an unbroken filament of silk that can be hundreds of meters long, almost unbelievable when you think about it. This filament is secreted from glands in their mouths and hardens on contact with the air, creating that soft, shimmering cocoon that will soon be harvested. The harvesting of cocoons is another slow, careful ritual. Timing is everything. The cocoon must be collected before the moth inside breaks free, which would cut the silk filament and ruin the thread's strength. The delicate task of boiling or steaming the cocoons to loosen the silk threads is handled with gentle hands, as too much heat or rough treatment can damage the precious fibers. You might find it surprising, but sericulture was such a well-guarded secret in ancient China that it was illegal to export silkworm eggs or cocoons for centuries. This monopoly helped build the Silk Road's mystique, creating a priceless trade item wrapped in mystery and protected by laws as strict as any treasures. As you imagine those quiet mulberry groves and the patient silkworms spinning their cocoons, you begin to appreciate how much time, care, and subtlety went into every inch of silk fabric. This isn't just a product, it's the result of an entire ecosystem woven together with human hands and natural cycles. So now, as your eyelids grow heavier, picture the silkworm's slow dance, its silent work, hidden beneath the leaves, and the quiet magic of transformation that makes silk possible. It's a gentle reminder that even the most delicate beauty often begins in the quietest, simplest moments. The night deepens and your mind drifts naturally to the less obvious parts of the silk-making world, specifically the tools that make the weaving possible. These aren't just any tools. They are finely crafted, often passed down for generations, each with its own story and place in the evening ritual of silk weaving. In the dim light, the wooden loom frames stand tall, their smooth surfaces worn by countless nights of patient hands. You imagine the loom as the silent partner in every weaving session, its creaks and groans as familiar as an old friend's whisper. The frame holds taut the warp threads, those long vertical lines that form the backbone of the fabric, while the weft threads cross horizontally, weaving the cloth stitch by stitch. The skill lies in managing both tension and timing, a delicate balance that the weavers mastered with almost meditative focus. The shuttle, that small boat-shaped tool that carries the weft thread, moves back and forth across the loom like a rhythmic wave. It's crafted to fit perfectly in the hand, often carved from bamboo or hardwood, and the sound it makes, soft but precise, is a soothing constant. The wood absorbs the warmth of the weaver's hand, creating an almost intimate connection between artisan and instrument. An intriguing detail is that some looms included small bells attached to the shuttle or frame, producing a gentle tinkle with each pass. This added a musical element to the weaving, a private symphony that kept the weaver in rhythm and perhaps lifted their spirits during long hours. You might chuckle at the thought of these ancient looms doubling as both productivity tools and lullaby makers. The heddles, thin loops or cords that lift specific warp threads, are another crucial part of the loom's orchestra. By raising and lowering heddles in sequence, the weaver creates the intricate patterns and textures that make each piece of silk unique. The heddles' movements are subtle, almost invisible, unless you know where to look, yet they are the key to unlocking the loom's magic. Historians still argue whether the earliest looms were simple horizontal frames or more complex vertical constructions. What's clear is that over centuries, the technology evolved alongside weaving traditions, blending efficiency with artistry. Some regions favored portable looms that could be disassembled, while others developed large, permanent setups that anchored the entire household's production. You also notice small tools like the beater, a wooden comb used to push the weft threads tightly into place after each pass. The beater's gentle tapping creates a satisfying sound that blends with the shuttle's rhythm, adding depth to the workshop's quiet soundtrack. Watching the beater in action is like watching a painter carefully filling in each stroke on a canvas. Among the more curious tools you glimpse are tiny scissors and needles used for tidying stray threads or adding embroidery once the main fabric was woven. These tools speak to the weaver's commitment to perfection and their keen eye for detail. In this dim-lit space filled with the soft sounds of wood and thread, you start to appreciate how each tool was not just functional, but a cherished extension of the weaver's skill and patience. They were companions in a slow dance of creation, each one helping transform humble silk threads into a fabric that could tell stories and hold memories. So as you let your mind wander over these wooden frames and tiny instruments, imagine their smooth surfaces and faint creaks, the quiet music of bells and taps guiding the weaver's hands. It's a gentle, tactile world, one that invites you to slow down and settle into the soothing rhythm of craft. As your thoughts glide softly onward, the scene shifts to the humble evenings spent in the weaver's home after the loom falls silent. Here, the quiet hum of the workshop gives way to the gentle crackle of a small hearth fire, the flickering warmth casting lazy shadows across the wooden walls. You can almost smell the faint scent of roasting chestnuts or a simmering herbal tea, comforting earthy aromas that invite you to relax even further. Evenings for the silk weavers were often simple affairs, a balance of rest and light household chores. Family members might gather to share stories or quietly prepare the next day's mulberry leaves, the vital food for the silkworms, while soft laughter floated through the rooms. It's a soothing image, almost like a lullaby for the soul, where the day's labor gives way to peaceful routine. You learn that weaving was not just a solitary craft, but deeply woven into family and community life. In some villages, women worked side by side at their looms during the day, then came together to share meals and stories at night, their voices mingling like threads in a communal tapestry. The evening was a time to reconnect and unwind, a gentle counterpoint to the focused rhythm of the day. A quirky little detail emerges in certain regions. The weavers practiced a form of evening meditation or chanting, softly repeating mantras, or folk songs thought to bring good luck to the silk and protect the family. While it sounds like a quaint superstition, it reveals how deeply intertwined the craft was with daily life and belief. Historians still argue whether these rituals were primarily spiritual or practical, aimed at fostering focus and calm. You might smile, imagining a group of weavers humming softly as they prepare the mulberry leaves or mend torn silk, their voices weaving a gentle soundtrack to the night. The sound is not loud or intrusive, but a warm presence that encourages rest. Lighting in these homes was modest, often limited to small oil lamps or paper lanterns. This soft, muted glow helped preserve the calm atmosphere, preventing harsh shadows or glaring light that might disturb the eyes tired from weaving. The play of light and shadow on the walls added a dreamlike quality to the evening, perfect for easing the mind. Dinner itself was usually a simple meal, rice, steamed vegetables, maybe some pickled greens. Nothing heavy or spicy, designed to be easy on the stomach before bedtime. Food was seasonal and locally sourced, reflecting a close connection to the land. The weavers' diet wasn't lavish, but nourishing, supporting their steady, patient work. You might find it interesting that some families kept small herb gardens near their homes, cultivating plants believed to aid sleep and digestion. Chamomile and jasmine, for example, were popular for evening teas. This natural approach to wellness feels surprisingly modern in its simplicity. As the night deepens, the household slowly quiets down. People begin to prepare for sleep, perhaps wrapping themselves in soft woven blankets or silk scarves, products of their own careful labor. The fabric itself carries the warmth and comfort of a day well spent, inviting peaceful dreams. So as you sink deeper into this calm evening scene, imagine the gentle firelight, the soft chatter, and the cozy meals shared in the humble homes of the silk weavers. It's a perfect moment to let your thoughts drift quietly away on a breeze of warmth and tradition. Night flows softly into the time when the silk weavers prepare their tools and threads for the next day's work, a ritual that feels as gentle and deliberate as the weaving itself. In the quiet before dawn, the workshop reawakens not with noise, but with the faint rustle of silk threads being carefully sorted and arranged. You can almost hear the hushed breath of a new day unfolding, the calm promise of steady hands returning to the loom. Preparing silk threads wasn't simply about tidying up. The threads had to be checked for strength and smoothness, with any snags gently repaired. You imagine the weaver's fingers moving with practiced care, running lightly over the delicate fibers to detect flaws invisible to the eye. Each thread had a story. Some had been dyed just hours before, others spun from freshly harvested cocoons. There was also a rhythm to winding the threads onto spools, a quiet dance of repetition that required both focus and a relaxed mind. Historians still argue whether some of the earliest silk spools were designed more for efficiency or to preserve the thread's delicate sheen. But what's clear is that these tools evolved to meet the specific needs of the silk craft. One quirky tradition involved using tiny weights made from carved jade or bone, tied to the threads to keep tension steady during winding. You might chuckle picturing a tiny jade charm gently swinging as the thread winds, a miniature talisman of luck and protection for the fabric to come. Preparing the loom's warp threads took just as much care. The warp needed to be perfectly aligned, tensioned evenly and free of twists. This was crucial. Any unevenness would affect the final fabric's texture and strength. You can almost see the weaver pausing, adjusting and readjusting the threads with a slow, deliberate patience that borders on meditation. Dyeing was another preparatory task, often done in the early morning light. The natural dyes extracted from plants like indigo, safflower and madder root were simmered gently, their deep colors releasing slowly into the water. The dyed threads would be rinsed, dried, and then woven into the loom, each shade carrying symbolic meaning. Deep blues evoked the vast sky, while reds whispered of celebration and good fortune. Even the smallest threads had to be handled with care. You might be surprised to learn that some silk weavers kept tiny brushes on hand to clean away dust or stray fibers, ensuring the purity of the fabric. These minute details reveal a world where every moment and movement was attuned to preserving beauty. As dawn breaks fully, the workshop fills with soft light, signaling the return to the loom and the steady, soothing rhythm of weaving. You can almost feel the calm continuity, the legacy of skill passed down quietly from one generation to the next. So as your thoughts gently settle on this slow morning preparation picture, the silk threads laid out like a soft rainbow, the jade weights gently swaying and the hands that move among them with timeless patience. It's a quiet world, perfect for easing into restful sleep. As the day unfolds, your attention drifts to the intricate world of silk patterns and designs, each thread woven with intention, carrying stories both grand and intimate. The art of patterning silk wasn't just about decoration. It was a language of symbols, a secret code whispered through fabric that spoke of status, belief, and beauty. You picture the weaver carefully selecting threads dyed in rich hues, deep crimson, soft gold, midnight blue, and laying out patterns inspired by nature, myth, and daily life. Some patterns were geometric, repeating endlessly in hypnotic rhythm, while others depicted dragons curling through clouds or blooming lotus flowers. Each design was painstakingly mapped out beforehand, requiring focus and imagination. One fascinating fact is that certain silk patterns were reserved exclusively for the emperor or high-ranking officials. Wearing these designs was like carrying a royal decree woven in thread. The most famous, the five-clawed dragon, symbolized imperial power, while others used cranes or phoenixes to convey longevity and rebirth. Historians still debate how strictly these regulations were enforced across different regions and dynasties. You might smile at a quirky detail. Some weavers incorporated tiny, secret motifs, a little frog, or a hidden blossom tucked away in the corner of a pattern, thought to bring good luck or ward off misfortune. These hidden symbols were personal touches, like a quiet signature from the artisan. The process of creating these patterns involved not just the loom, but also specialized tools like wooden templates or carved stamps. In some workshops, designs were drawn directly onto the silk using natural inks, before weaving began, helping the weaver keep track of complex sequences. Weaving a patterned fabric demanded extraordinary concentration. One mistake could unravel hours of work. You imagine the weaver's steady hands moving methodically, eyes flickering between loom and design, weaving a silent story in silk that only those who know the language can truly read. There was also a playful side to this art. In some villages, competitions were held to see who could create the most intricate or unusual pattern. These contests weren't loud or boisterous, but gentle challenges that fostered community pride and creative exploration. As you picture the vibrant colors and delicate motifs taking shape under skilled fingers, you begin to feel the quiet joy of creation. The patterns aren't just beautiful, they're threads of history woven carefully to connect past, present, and future. So as your eyelids grow heavier, let your mind wander over these slow, deliberate strokes of artistry. Imagine the silk shimmering in soft lamplight, carrying the stories of ancient hands who worked patiently through the night. The gentle rhythm of the loom invites you further into the quiet world of silk weaving, where every moment is punctuated by soft, satisfying sounds. The shuttle's whisper, the beater's tap. But beyond the patterns and threads, the silk itself carries a story that's just as rich, the story of its place in the lives of those who wore it. You imagine the delicate garments made from these silks, robes, scarves, and sashes that moved like liquid light over the bodies of nobles and commoners alike. Silk wasn't just fabric. It was a statement of elegance, comfort, and sometimes subtle power. Wearing silk could signify everything from wealth to a special occasion or simply a tender moment of self-care. One of the fascinating facts is that silk garments often took months to create, sometimes even years if they were embroidered or patterned with extraordinary detail. These slow creations were treasured possessions passed down like family heirlooms. Historians still debate how much the average person in ancient China had access to silk clothing, but there's no question it was highly prized and carefully preserved. A charming little detail comes from the way silk was cared for after weaving. You might smile picturing delicate washing rituals where garments were gently soaked in water scented with jasmine or chrysanthemum petals. Harsh soaps were taboo as they could damage the fragile fibers. This care extended the life of silk, making it a fabric that aged gracefully, much like the people who wore it. Silk also played a role in special ceremonies. weddings, festivals, and religious rites. Certain colors and patterns were chosen for their symbolic meanings: red for happiness, white for purity, blue for immortality. Wearing silk in these moments was a way of participating in traditions that stretched back centuries. You might find it amusing that silk was sometimes used in pillowcases or bedding believed to bring restful sleep and sweet dreams. The smooth texture was thought to soothe the skin and mind, a luxurious but practical choice for those who could afford it. The journey of silk from cocoon to garment was a slow, deliberate process, much like the lives of the people who treasured it. Every thread carried not just a story of craft, but also of care, patience, and quiet beauty. As your thoughts soften around these shimmering fabrics, imagine the gentle brush of silk against skin, the faint scent of flowers still clinging to freshly washed robes, and the slow passage of time marked by quiet moments wrapped in elegance. The soft clatter of the loom fades as your mind drifts to the merchants and traders who carried silk far beyond the borders of its birthplace. You imagine dusty caravan routes stretching across deserts and mountains where silk, light as air yet worth its weight in gold, was a prized treasure that changed hands many times before reaching distant lands. These silk traders were a special breed of traveler, accustomed to long journeys filled with equal parts patience and caution. Their caravans moved slowly, the rhythmic clip-clop of camels' hooves marking the passage of days under blazing sun and starry nights. The silk they carried was carefully wrapped in cloth, protected from dust and moisture, a fragile gem on a rough road. One curious fact is that silk was so valuable, it was sometimes used as currency or diplomatic gifts, a silent language of respect and power between distant kingdoms. Historians still debate the exact routes and frequency of these early trade missions, but it's clear that silk played a crucial role in connecting cultures across continents. You might chuckle imagining a weary trader unfurling a shimmering bolt of silk after a long day's travel just to admire its softness and remind himself of home. This tactile connection to distant lands made the arduous journey feel a little less lonely. The famous Silk Road wasn't just one road, but a network of paths weaving through Central Asia, connecting China to Persia, India, and even the Roman Empire. Along these routes, silk mingled with spices, precious metals, and exotic goods, sparking a cross-cultural exchange that shaped history in subtle ways. Some scholars speculate that the desire for silk even influenced political alliances and conflicts, as control over these lucrative trade routes meant wealth and prestige. Yet despite its value, the secret of silk production was fiercely guarded by the Chinese, for centuries adding an air of mystery to its journey westward. The silk traders' lives were filled with stories of resilience and adaptation, navigating harsh climates, forging friendships with local tribes, and sometimes facing bandits or natural hazards. It's a world full of quiet adventure where the slow pace of the caravan encouraged reflection and storytelling under the vast sky. So, as you sink deeper into the comfort of this sleepy history picture, the endless caravan trains winding across desert dunes, the shimmering silk catching the morning light, and the gentle murmur of a world slowly connected by threads of silk. The road winds on, carrying you to the lively markets where silk finally reaches eager hands far from its origins. Imagine the bustling bazaars filled with vibrant colors, enticing scents, and a gentle hum of negotiation, a far cry from the quiet workshops back in China, yet connected by the same shimmering thread. In these marketplaces, silk dazzled the eye and captivated the senses. You can almost see the bolts of fabric stacked high, their textures catching sunlight through the market tents, drawing in buyers from near and far. Merchants displayed their finest silks alongside spices, ceramics, and precious stones, weaving together a rich tapestry of goods and cultures. A charming fact is that silk was often paired with fragrances, incense, or perfumed oils to enhance its allure. Buyers might gently brush their fingers over the fabric, inhaling faint hints of sandalwood or jasmine, making the experience of purchasing silk a sensory delight. Historians still argue whether these scents were primarily marketing tools or had cultural significance tied to silk's symbolism. You might smile, picturing a playful exchange between a merchant and a curious customer, where silk served as much as a conversation starter as a valuable commodity. In some regions, silk even became a fashionable currency for bartering, accepted for goods and services beyond clothing. Beyond commerce, silk influenced local fashions and crafts. Tailors and seamstresses adapted Chinese weaving techniques and patterns to suit their own tastes, blending traditions into new hybrid styles. This cultural exchange created fascinating variations, sometimes lighter, sometimes more ornate, reflecting the tastes and values of distant peoples. Interestingly, some markets specialized in specific silk products, from finely embroidered handkerchiefs to practical silk bags used by travelers. You can imagine the delicate craftsmanship behind these items, each a small story woven into daily life. The journey of silk through these markets was more than a transfer of goods. It was a meeting point of stories, techniques, and dreams. Silk became a silent ambassador, speaking of faraway places and the gentle patience of those who made it. As your mind drifts among the lively sounds and scents of these ancient bazaars, let the soft imagery carry you further into a peaceful sleep, wrapped in the timeless elegance of silk's journey. As the day wanes, your thoughts settle on the quieter side of silk's story, the homes and workshops where the fabric was cared for long after its weaving. Imagine the tender rituals of cleaning, repairing, and storing silk garments, a slow dance of preservation that kept these treasures alive through time. You picture gentle hands unrolling silk scarves or robes, inspecting each thread for wear and tear. Unlike sturdier fabrics, silk demanded special attention. Harsh soaps or vigorous scrubbing could damage its delicate fibers. Instead, garments were often washed in lukewarm water, scented with gentle herbs like chrysanthemum or camellia, and dried away from direct sunlight to preserve color. One endearing fact is that some households kept small boxes of natural starch made from rice or wheat to lightly stiffen silk sleeves or collars, helping garments hold their shape without losing softness. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was across different social classes, but it clearly shows a loving care for the fabric's longevity. You might find it amusing that in some regions people stored their silk clothes wrapped in fragrant paper infused with jasmine or sandalwood, both to deter moths and to keep the scent fresh. These delicate rituals turned simple storage into an act of mindfulness. Repairing silk was an art in itself. Tiny tears were mended with invisible stitches, often by the original weaver or a skilled family member. This quiet practice of restoration reflects a deep respect for the fabric's value and the memories woven into it. Storage also required thought. Silk was sometimes kept in wooden chests lined with soft cloth or paper in cool, dry places to avoid damage from moisture or pests. This careful stewardship preserved not just garments, but also heirlooms passed down through generations. The quiet evening hours were perfect for these caring tasks. As the household settled, the gentle rhythm of mending and folding silk created a soothing backdrop, a tactile meditation on time and patience. So as your own day closes, imagine the soft rustle of silk being gently smoothed, the faint scent of jasmine lingering in the air, and the quiet devotion of hands preserving beauty for the future. Let this calm, tender scene ease you toward restful sleep. As night deepens, your thoughts drift to the stories whispered in the shadows, tales told by the silk itself, woven with memories and mysteries that endure through time. You imagine the soft glow of lantern light in a humble home where silk cloths hung like quiet witnesses to daily life's joys and sorrows. Silk wasn't merely fabric. It was a companion in the silent moments, draping beds, adorning altars, and marking rites of passage. The stories embedded in these silks, whether an embroidered phoenix symbolizing rebirth or a delicate lotus representing purity, carried hopes, dreams, and prayers woven with care. One intriguing fact is that some families kept small scraps of old silk, treasured for their connection to ancestors and moments long past. These fragments became talismans sewn into new garments or kept in special boxes. Historians still argue how common this practice was, but its emotional resonance is undeniable. You might smile imagining a child tracing the faint patterns on a faded silk handkerchief, unaware of the centuries of care and tradition wrapped up in that small piece of cloth. The slow life of silk weavers and their families was deeply intertwined with the fabric they created. Every thread held meaning beyond the practical, a quiet reminder of patient skill and the beauty found in slow, deliberate work. As your eyelids grow heavier, picture the soft hum of night settling over the workshop, the gentle creak of wooden looms at rest, and the delicate shimmer of silk catching moonlight through a small window. These quiet images fold around you like the finest fabric, inviting calm and peace. Now take a deep breath and let the softness of silk's story lull you further, carrying you gently toward dreams woven from the quiet threads of history.